A figure seen by billions as beyond the reach of earthly chains. A spiritual leader meant to guide, not be confined. But what happens when the papal tiara clashes with an emperor's crown, or when a pope's actions become so outrageous they invite retribution? History reveals a surprising number of popes who found themselves stripped of freedom, some as martyrs to political ambition, standing firm against powerful rulers. Others arguably earned their through corruption, cruelty, or scandal. So profound it provoked their downfall. It's a tale of power, piety, and sometimes outright villainy. Today we're unlocking these forgotten cells. We'll explore popes who endured captivity for their principles, and those whose confinement felt like long overdue justice. Case number 1. Pope Pius VII. Imprisoned by Napoleon 1809 to 1814. Spiritual resistance to imperial might. We begin with a pope whose imprisonment became a symbol of defiance. Pope Pius VII, in the early 19th century, found himself eye to eye with one of history's most formidable figures, Napoleon Bonaparte. After Napoleon declared himself emperor and annexed the Papal States, tensions soared. When Pius VII dared to excommunicate the all-powerful emperor, Napoleon's response was swift and brutal. In 1809, French troops stormed the Quirinal Palace in Rome, arrested the Pope, and deported him. He was held captive for nearly 5 years, first in Savone, Italy, then under harsher conditions in Fontainebleau, France, constantly pressured to legitimize Napoleon's control over church affairs. Pius VII, though physically frail, largely resisted Napoleon's demands. He refused to invest bishops appointed by the emperor or validate Napoleon's controversial divorce and remarriage. His steadfastness, despite years of isolation and coercion, transformed him into a European symbol of spiritual resistance against tyranny. He was finally released and returned triumphantly to Rome in 1814, after Napoleon's downfall. His was an imprisonment born of principle. Case number 2. Pope Boniface VIII. Briefly imprisoned, 1303. The king's fury, the pope's humiliation. Centuries earlier, Pope Boniface VIII represented the peak of papal claims to supremacy over kings. His famous bull, Unam Sanctam, declared that submission to the Pope was necessary for salvation, infuriating powerful monarchs like King Philip IV of France, with whom he clashed fiercely over church taxes and authority. Philip IV, not one to be cowed, sent his envoy Guillaume de Nogaret, along with Sciarra Colonna, a Roman enemy of Boniface, to confront the Pope at his palace in Anagni. What followed was the outrage of Anagni. The elderly Boniface was threatened, allegedly slapped or roughed up, and effectively held prisoner in his own palace for 3 days. Though rescued by locals, the shock and humiliation were immense. Boniface VIII died just a month later, his health shattered. While his confinement was brief, it was a brutal demonstration of a powerful king's ability to physically defy and detain the Pope, signaling a major crack in the edifice of papal temporal power. His was a captivity resulting from a high-stakes political gamble that backfired catastrophically. Case number 3. Pope John XII. Deposed by council and briefly imprisoned, 963. The teenage tyrant's reckoning. John XII ascended to the papacy at a mere 18 years old. His reign quickly descended into a legendary saga of debauchery. The Lateran Palace reportedly transformed into a brothel, church offerings gambled away, accusations of murder, arson, and even the invocation of pagan gods during his hedonistic revelries. The list compiled by contemporary chroniclers is long and shocking. His scandalous behavior threatened not only the moral authority of the papacy, but the very stability of Rome. Holy Roman Emperor Otto I, initially an ally, was profoundly disturbed. Otto marched on Rome and convened a synod of bishops in 963. This synod, after hearing extensive testimony detailing John XII's numerous crimes, formally declared him deposed due to his turpitudinous life. John XII initially fled, allowing Otto to install a new pope, Leo VIII. However, true to form, when Otto departed Rome, John XII stormed back, excommunicated Leo VIII, and unleashed brutal reprisals against his opponents. Otto was compelled to return to restore order, while John XII wasn't subjected to a prolonged imprisonment by Otto's forces before his own rather fittingly bizarre death. His formal deposition and the repeated need for imperial military intervention were direct consequences of his tyrannical and immoral rule. Many argued he deserved far worse. Case number 4. Pope John X, imprisoned and smothered, circa 928. Power player in a lawless age, jailed by a rival. The early 10th century, the Saeculum Obscurum, or Dark Age of the papacy, was a brutal free-for-all. Powerful Roman aristocratic families, particularly the Theophylacti, essentially controlled papal appointments. Pope John X, initially an ally of this faction, was a militarily capable pope who even led troops against Saracen raiders. However, he eventually fell afoul of the ambitions of Marozia, a dominant member of the Theophylacti clan. Marozia, seeking even more direct control over Rome and the papacy, likely to install her own son as pope, which later happened, orchestrated a coup d'état against John X. Power, not piety, dictated fate. John X was overthrown and imprisoned in Castel Sant'Angelo, a formidable fortress in Rome that often served as a papal prison. He died there shortly after, reportedly smothered with a pillow. While his crime was essentially losing a political power struggle in a lawless era, his imprisonment and murder highlight how popes whose reigns became inconvenient to the true power brokers of Rome could easily end up jailed and eliminated. Case number 5. Pope Leo V, imprisoned and murdered, 903, and Pope Christopher Antipope, imprisoned and murdered, 904, rapid revolving door to the dungeon. Still within the chaotic 10th century, the fates of Leo V and his usurper, Christopher, illustrate the lethal instability. Pope Leo V reigned for just about 30 days in 903, before being overthrown and imprisoned by Cardinal Christopher. Christopher then declared himself pope, though he's often considered an anti-pope. His reign was equally short. After a few months in early 904, Christopher himself was overthrown by Sergius III, another powerful figure backed by the Theophylacti. Christopher was then thrown into the same prison as Leo V had been, and both were reportedly murdered there on Sergius's orders. These weren't imprisonments following grand trials or for specific moral failings debated by councils. This was raw, brutal politics where the papal office was a prize, and losing meant the dungeon and often death. These popes deserved their fate only in the sense that they were players in a deeply corrupt system where imprisonment was a common tool for rivals seeking the throne. Their cells were a testament to the papacy's degradation. Case number 6. Pope John XXIII, Pisan claimant, imprisoned by Council of Constance 1415, not to be confused with the revered 20th century Pope John XXIII. This earlier figure, Baldassare Icossa, was one of the 3 rival popes during the Great Western Schism. Elected by the Council of Pisa, his claim to the papacy was widely disputed. His reputation was more that of a cunning and ruthless military commander, a condottiero and political opportunist than a man of God. When the Council of Constance assembled to resolve the schism, John XXIII initially presided. However, accurately sensing that the council intended to depose all 3 existing claimants to pave the way for a fresh election, he attempted a desperate flight in disguise, hoping his absence would disrupt or dissolve the council. He was swiftly captured, brought back under guard, and put on formal trial. The accusations brought against him by the council were numerous and damning, including simony, buying his way into church offices, tyranny, gross immorality, and even the poisoning of his predecessor. Though some charges were likely politically inflated to guarantee his removal, the council found him guilty, and formally deposed him in May 1415. He was then handed over for imprisonment and spent several years confined in various locations in Germany. His jailing was a direct and arguably deserved consequence of his actions that perpetuated the schism, his alleged personal crimes, and his defiance of a church council striving for unity. Case number 7. Pope Stephen VI. Imprisoned and strangled, 897. Justice for the Cadaver Synod. We now arrive at a pope whose single infamous act of grotesque retribution sealed his own grim fate. Stephen VI, consumed by a venomous political hatred for his predecessor Pope Formosus, orchestrated the truly ghoulish Cadaver Synod. He had Formosus's 9-month-old corpse exhumed from its grave, dressed in full papal vestments, propped onto a throne, and subjected to a bizarre and horrifying trial. This macabre spectacle, where the deceased pope was found guilty, his papal acts declared null, his sacred blessing fingers brutally hacked off, and his mutilated body thrown into the Tiber River, understandably horrified even the battle-hardened and cynical Roman populace of the 9th century. It wasn't merely a political maneuver, it was widely perceived as a profound and disturbing sacrilege, an offense against God and basic human decency. The public revulsion was immediate and intense. Almost instantly, a rival political faction in Rome, capitalizing on the widespread outrage and disgust, rose up in revolt against Stephen VI. He was overthrown, stripped of his papal dignity, a common humiliation for deposed popes, and unceremoniously cast into a dungeon. Shortly thereafter, he was found strangled in his cell, a violent end to a violent and controversial papacy. While factional politics certainly played their part, his imprisonment and subsequent death were undeniably the direct, bloody consequence of his own horrific and universally condemned actions. Many felt justice, however brutal, had been served. When the untouchable faces judgment, these varied cases, from Pius VII's principled stand against an emperor, to Stephen VI's self-inflicted doom, from Boniface VIII's humiliation to John XXIII's formal jailing by a church council, illustrate that the papal office, despite its immense spiritual claims, was never entirely immune to earthly confinement or judgment when its actions became too problematic or its power was successfully challenged. Claims to divine authority have not always granted immunity from the consequences of one's actions, especially when those actions drag the institution itself and the faith it purports to represent into profound disrepute. The keys to the kingdom sometimes also unlocked a prison cell. Which pope's imprisonment or downfall do you find most justified or most tragic? Are there other pontiffs whose fates deserve scrutiny? Share your historical perspectives in the comments. And for more deep dives into the complex intersections of power, faith, and justice, make sure you subscribe.